Some names in history shine with greatness. Others are remembered with pain. Adolf Hitler is one of those names. Loved by some, hated by many, he became a man who changed the world forever. But before he was a dictator, he was just a boy with big dreams, a boy who wanted to be an artist. This is not just a story about war or power. It's a story about choices, failure, ambition, and human weakness. It's a story we can all learn from. So sit back, lean back, put on your headphones, close your eyes, and travel back in time to understand the rise and fall of Adolf Hitler, the man whose dream became the world's nightmare. It all began on April 20, 1889, in a quiet Austrian town called Braunau am Inn. A baby boy was born to Alois and Clara Hitler. They named him Adolf. No one in that small home could imagine that this boy would one day shake the world. As a child, Adolf loved to draw, to play outside, and to dream big. He wasn't special, just another boy with hopes and imagination. But his world wasn't peaceful. His father, Alois, was a harsh and serious man who wanted his son to work for the government, a safe, respectable job. But Adolf had a different dream. He didn't want to wear a uniform or follow orders. He wanted to paint. He wanted to be free. His father often shouted at him, saying, "Art is not a real job." And young Adolf would stay silent, hiding his tears. When he was 13, his father suddenly died. Some people thought the boy would feel free at last, but instead, he felt lost. He stopped caring about school. He once had good grades, but now he simply didn't listen. He spent most of his days drawing, dream-gazing, and thinking of a future where he could prove everyone wrong. When he finished school, he packed his bags and moved to Vienna, the capital of Austria, a city full of music, art, and culture. He was excited. "This is my chance," he thought. "I will become a great artist." He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts, one of the best art schools in Europe. But when the results came, his heart broke. He was rejected. They said his drawings were not good enough. He tried again the next year. Rejected again. Now he had no school, no job, and almost no money. He lived in tiny rooms, sold postcards, and sometimes slept on the streets. And then tragedy struck again. His mother died. She was the only person who truly loved and believed in him. Her death left him completely alone. In his loneliness, something began to grow inside him. Anger. He felt the world was unfair. He began to blame others. "It's not my fault," he whispered to himself. "It's their fault." That single thought, that seed of hate, would one day grow into something the world would never forget. After years of failure and loneliness in Vienna, Adolf Hitler had lost almost everything: his dreams, his mother, and his hope. He wandered the streets, selling small paintings to survive. Sometimes he slept in shelters, surrounded by other poor men who also had nothing left. Vienna was a city full of beauty, but to Adolf it became a place of pain. He watched others live happy lives while he struggled to eat, and in his heart, bitterness grew. Then, in 1914, everything changed. World War I began. For millions, it was the start of suffering. But for Adolf, it was the first time he felt purpose. He joined the German army as a soldier. He finally belonged to something bigger than himself. He wore the uniform proudly and said, "Now I serve my country." In the trenches of war, life was harsh. There was cold, hunger, fear, and death all around. But Adolf found discipline and pride in the army. For the first time, he felt respect from others. He worked as a messenger, running across dangerous battlefields to deliver messages between officers. Bullets flew past him, bombs exploded near him, but he kept going. He was brave and fearless, and his commanders noticed. He received 2 medals for bravery, including the famous Iron Cross. To him, it was proof that he was not a failure. But in 1918, the war ended, and Germany lost. For Adolf, it was a deep wound. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't believe that the country he fought for, the country he loved, had been defeated. He believed that the leaders had betrayed the soldiers, that something had gone terribly wrong. He lay in a hospital bed, recovering from a gas attack, when the news came that Germany had surrendered. He wept in silence. In that moment, something inside him broke. The dream he had found in war, the feeling of unity and pride, was gone. All he saw now was shame and chaos.
When the war ended, Germany was a nation in despair. People were hungry. Money had lost its value. Families were broken. And soldiers who returned from war found nothing waiting for them. No jobs, no homes, no future. Adolf was one of them.
He walked the streets once again, but this time with rage in his heart. He saw people arguing, blaming each other for Germany's defeat. He listened to speeches in beer halls, speeches filled with anger, fear, and nationalism. And slowly, he began to speak too. At first, only a few people listened, but those who did said there was something powerful in his voice. When Adolf spoke, he didn't sound like a politician. He sounded like a man who had suffered, like one of them. He spoke about pride, about unity, and about a stronger Germany. People clapped. They shouted his name. And for the first time since the war, Adolf felt something dangerous: power. In his mind, he was no longer the poor boy who failed at art. He was a man with a mission. He believed destiny had chosen him to rebuild Germany and to make it great again, no matter the cost. After the war, Germany was broken, not just its cities, but its spirit. People had lost faith in their leaders. The economy was destroyed. A piece of bread cost more than a man's daily wage. Children cried from hunger, and families lived in fear. Adolf Hitler walked through this chaos like a man searching for direction. He had no money, no job, and no family. But he had one thing: his anger. And he began to turn that anger into words. In 1919, he joined a small political group called the German Workers' Party. It was tiny. Only a few members met in the back rooms of beer halls to argue about politics and the future of Germany. One night, Adolf stood up to speak. His words were full of passion, anger, and pain. He spoke about pride, unity, and a revenge. When he finished, The room fell silent. Then, applause filled the air. People had never heard anyone speak like that before. He was raw. He was emotional. He was dangerous and magnetic. Soon, Adolf became the group's main speaker. He could make people feel powerful even when they were poor and hopeless. When he talked about Germany rising again, the crowd shouted and cheered. He made them believe that together they could rebuild their pride. He told them who to blame for their suffering. He said Germany didn't lose the war, it was betrayed. He blamed the government, other nations, and entire groups of people. His words created both unity and hatred. By 1920, Adolf had changed the name of the group. It was no longer the German Workers' Party. It became the National Socialist German Workers' Party, also known as the Nazi Party. He helped design a new flag, red, white, and black, with a black swastika in the center. To many, it became a symbol of pride. To others, it became a symbol of fear. Crowds grew larger with every speech, from small rooms to packed beer halls, and soon to stadiums. People shouted his name, raised their hands, and believed his promises. Adolf's confidence grew. He began to see himself not just as a leader, but as the savior of Germany. But power always wants more power. In 1923, Adolf tried to take control of the government by force. It became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He and his followers marched through Munich, trying to start a revolution, but they failed. Police opened fire. 16 of his men were killed, and Adolf was arrested. He was sent to prison for 9 months. But this time behind bars did not break him. It gave him time to plan, time to write, and time to dream. Inside his cell, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. In it, he described his vision for Germany, his hatred, his goals, and his belief that only he could lead the nation back to greatness. It was a dangerous book, one that would later change history. When Adolf was released, he was no longer just a failed artist or a soldier. He was a man with a plan, and millions were ready to follow him. He learned something in prison. To win power, you don't take it by force. You take it with words, fear, and belief. The year was 1933. Germany was tired, broken, and desperate for change. The economy was weak. People wanted food, jobs, and hope. And in that moment of fear and confusion, Adolf Hitler rose to power. He was no longer just a speaker. He had become the Chancellor of Germany. At first, people thought it was temporary. They believed the government could control him, but they were wrong. Hitler was a master of emotion. He knew how to use words like weapons. He promised to rebuild the nation, restore pride, and make Germany strong again. And the people believed him. Crowds filled the streets. Flags with swastikas waved in every town. Children sang songs about him in schools. Step by step, he changed the country and the minds of its people. He banned other political parties. He controlled newspapers, movies, and the radio. Every voice that disagreed was silenced. Books were burned. Truth was replaced by propaganda. He created a new world, one where loyalty to him was everything, where fear ruled every home, where children were taught that some people were pure and others weren't even human. In 1934, when Germany's president died, Hitler took complete control. He called himself Führer, the leader. Now he had absolute power. Under his rule, Germany changed fast. Factories opened again, new roads were built, people found work and felt proud to be German. But behind the pride, something dark was growing. Jews, political opponents, and minorities were pushed out of jobs, homes, and schools. They were beaten in the streets, humiliated, and forced to wear signs that marked them as different. Many Germans stayed silent. Some agreed. Others were too afraid to speak. Hitler's speeches were louder than ever. He told the people that Germany needed more land, more power, and a new destiny. And millions believed every word. By 1938, he had already taken Austria and parts of Czechoslovakia, without a single war. The world watched, but did nothing. No one wanted another conflict. But Adolf wanted more. And soon, the world would pay the price. It was September 1, 1939. The world woke up to the sound of war. German tanks rolled into Poland, crushing everything in their way. Bombs fell from the sky. Cities burned. The world that had feared war now had no choice. World War II had begun. Hitler's army was fast and powerful. He called his new method Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Planes attacked first, tanks followed, and soldiers came last. No one could stop them. In weeks, Poland was gone. Soon after, Denmark, Norway, France, and many others fell too. Europe was burning, and Hitler stood in the center of it all. In every new land, his soldiers brought not just war, but hate. Jewish families were taken from their homes. Children were separated from their parents. Men and women were sent to camps, where many would never return. The world didn't yet understand how dark things would become. By 1941, Hitler turned his eyes to the east, to the Soviet Union. Millions of soldiers marched into Russia. It was one of the largest invasions in history. But winter came. Freezing tanks, men, and hope. Still, Hitler refused to stop. His pride was greater than reason. That same year, he made another enemy, the United States. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, America joined the war. Now the world stood against Hitler. The Allies, the US, Britain, the Soviet Union, and others began to fight back. The war changed everything. Cities became battlefields.
Families lost everything. Young men became soldiers before they became adults. Women worked in factories, building planes and weapons. Everyone had to fight, not just with guns, but with courage. In the air, on the sea, and across the land, the Allies pushed back. Step by step, the German army began to fall. But Hitler didn't see it. He was blind to the truth. He lived in his bunker, giving orders no one could follow, believing victory was still possible. By 1944, the Allies landed in France on a day called D-Day. It was one of the largest invasions in history. Thousands died, but it marked the beginning of the end. Germany's power was breaking. Hitler's empire was crumbling. And as his enemies closed in, the world prepared for the final act, the fall of a man who wanted to rule the world. It was 1945. The once powerful German army was broken. Allied forces were closing in from the west. The Soviet army was marching from the east. Bombs fell on Berlin, the city that once stood proud under Hitler's rule. Now it was nothing but ruins and fire. Hitler had lost almost everything: his empire, his army, and the trust of his people. But inside his underground bunker, he refused to see the truth. He sat in silence, shaking, giving orders that no one could follow. Maps covered the walls, but the red lines of victory had turned into circles of defeat. His world was collapsing, and so was his mind. Food was running out. People were starving. Even his closest followers began to lose faith. Outside, Soviet soldiers were only a few streets away. The city was dying, and with it, Hitler's dream of a 1,000-year empire. In his final days, he married Eva Braun, the woman who had been by his side for years. They held a small ceremony in the bunker, a quiet moment in the middle of chaos. But it was not a celebration. It was goodbye. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler made his last decision. He did not want to be captured. He did not want the world to see him weak. So he ended his life. The man who once promised to change the world left it in ashes. Above the bunker, the red flag of the Soviet Union was raised. The war in Europe was over. People cheered in the streets. Families cried with relief. But the joy was mixed with pain. Millions had died. Cities were destroyed. The world had learned a hard truth: that hate and power can destroy everything. After the war, the world began to rebuild. Nations came together to make peace. New leaders promised to never let such darkness rise again. The memory of what happened remained as a warning for the future. History is not just about the past. It's about what we choose to remember and what we choose to learn. Adolf Hitler's story is not of greatness, but of warning. It reminds us what happens when fear becomes power, when pride becomes blindness, and when hate replaces love. But it also shows something deeper: that even in the darkest moments, humanity can rise again. People rebuilt their homes, nations rebuilt peace, and the world moved forward with hope. So when you listen to this story, don't just remember the man, remember the message. Power built on hate always falls, but kindness, peace, and truth, they last forever. If this story inspired you or helped you learn something new, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words, your voice, and your curiosity, that's how we learn, grow, and build a better world together. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep learning one story at a time.